Recording, cool, perfect. I'm here with my little guy, and I'm going to explain some advanced concepts. I'm going to make you all into panjungians here. I haven't recorded this or written a script or anything. However, I have prepared this little thing that I'm going to take a picture of and send as an attachment. I will first read the definitions of this little visuo-spatial model that I'm making in order to illustrate how I'm approaching my mission here. So in this model, in this sort of visual aid model, the big sphere here that I'm holding is going to represent the entire conceptual space of the domain with which we are concerned. In this case, this sphere represents human psyche or personality. On the surface of this, I have delineated given spaces, these octants. These represent subdomains of a given model or represents the subdomains that any given model ostensibly describes. The exact boundaries of the delineation arise as a direct and passive function of the origination point, which are here circled on the surface. The octant with which I am going to concern myself is that of human cognition, information metabolism, whatever you want to say. I might have it here as true CT I have written, and there is these solid lines over that. On this other part of this sphere of human psyche, there is maybe the octant representing the ego structural organization represented by the Enneagram, or as attempted to be represented by. The origination point that is defining the space of the octants, I have here on the surface of the sphere 2 different origination points. These circles of these origination points define the space that they describe. This sort of regular octant here is going to be representative of what it is in cognitive typology that as existent in the human psyche in reality that we are communally attempting to describe. You have here an additional origination point representing a separate model that misses the mark in some way and includes all this hatched region of extraneity. And man, these mosquitoes, man, ooh, they are rough. These origination points are representative of the set of axioms, whether implicit or explicit, that form the basis of the model as used. These directly define, as I explained, the subdominial space that any given model will itself tend to describe. The little spheres up here are representative of the models as they exist non-rigidly, sort of fuzzily, in terms of language, in terms of how they are portrayed in vignettes and portraits of the types and whatnot. So like Robosphere as LII is an example of a facet, a subdomain of this domain of model A. We could say this model is model A here. The connecting wire is representative of the deductive flow that constitutes the translation of the model from the set of axioms, which the origination point is a set of axioms, which are being treated by me as too abstract, too theoretical to really grapple with in any sort of interpersonal way that's helpful for teaching and using. So like in Enneagram, you might say, oh, you are an exteriorized anger type. And what does that mean to you? That doesn't really mean anything. Whereas if I say you're a type that cares about control and you are often openly angry and blah blah blah, these sorts of terms that you can actually intellectualize and integrate into a more visceral linguistic understanding, verbal understanding. That represents the exteriorized anger is this origination point here, the axiom, and then the portrait is the model. The connecting wire represents the process, the sort of the way we derive it from the axiom to the engageable form. And that can be either valid or invalid. It may or may not be explicit. I haven't tended to see a explicated deductive flow for model A, but if it were, say, invalid, it might look like this. And then you have this model, which we are trying to use to describe this. And while the axioms do define the space that we are attempting to describe, the invalid deductive flow means that rather than describing, say, this octant here, we are perhaps describing an octant over here that, like this other octant with the hatched region representing the extraneity, we are either partially or wholly missing the mark. In terms of, so as why I have identified with panjungianism for a while has been that there is this true CT that I think Jung saw, and that at which almost all of neo-Jungian cognitive typology is aiming to describe through the instantiation of MBTI, of Model A. In this case, we might say Model A is closer to true CT, true cognitive typology, whereas MBTI includes all this extraneity because it's over here. Whether it has the same axioms and bends or not, that's part of the mission of what I am seeking to discover. What I want to do is identify what I have at least discovered so far, in my opinion, is that Model A and MBTI are they may overlap, but they are not coextensive. They are not the same. You are not necessarily the same type in between the systems. And so they may be close, they may be far, they may be overlapping, they may not have any overlap at all. What I have yet to discover, in my opinion, is, or to determine, is whether Model A follows from its axioms and whether MBTI follows from its axioms. In order to do that, first I will need to ascertain exactly what the axioms of Model A are. Ibrahim Tensor, with his whole socionics, has said that has been kind of what he's been working on since 2011. So I'll be reading what he's written, and I've talked to a couple other people that have had their own attempts to sort of capture the same. Reading psychological types, reading gifts differing, reading sort of neo-Jungian theorists since then, like Beebe and Nardi and whomever else, and even modern evolutions of MBTI, of Western CT, will give me an eye into what those axioms are. If the axioms are reconcilable, if I get the sense that they seem to be attempting to be instantiated in a way that covers the same conceptual subdominial space, then I would say they ought to be brought into alignment. Whether they are or they aren't, in each case the deductive flow will be either valid or invalid. Always it should be valid. If that validity creates a model that describes a space that you feel is not quite capturing the space you had intended, then there's an axiomatic issue, and that needs to be corrected at that level. If the axioms are good once you've explicated them, and the model is still faulty, then there's some bend in the deductive flow, and that itself needs to be corrected. So yeah, if you guys have any ideas on how to taxonomize in a explicit, overarching way neo-Jungian cognitive typology and JCT in any sort of holistic sense, I am very interested. Please refer me to people, please give me links, please contact me. Maybe I'll end up thinking that all of NJCT is reconcilable, it all is convergent, it's all compatibilist, and that panjungianism is the answer, or maybe most systems have intrinsically flawed premises and MBTI just needs to be thrown out and discontinued in use, or maybe it touches on a separate yet equally valid octant, equally valid subdomain of human psyche, and is just maybe overlaps, maybe it doesn't with model A. Maybe one's more behavioral, one's more information metabolic, who knows. Yeah, but that should cover it. Thanks for filming, Kelly.